Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary Angela Rayner has been criticised by the families and survivors of the Grenfell Tower tragedy, where 72 people lost their lives, over the decision, which has just been announced, that the building will be demolished. Yes, and she has been accused of ignoring the bereaved. Many of the survivors say it is unforgivable. Joining us now is the Energy Minister, Michael Shanks. Now, Mr Shanks, good morning to you. I know that you have a really important announcement on nuclear power and the impact on energy bills, but it is rather overshadowed this morning by this sort of unseemly row now that has emerged between the Deputy Prime Minister, who's probably trying to do absolutely the best when it comes to what happens to the Grenfell Tower, but the bereaved and survivors don't feel like they're on board. Has she failed to get everyone together before making this announcement that Grenfell's going to be demolished?
Well, look, firstly, can I just say, I think this is one of the worst tragedies we've seen as a country. And so, of course, my heart continues to go out to the families who are obviously still grieving in what is still a very raw situation. The Deputy Prime Minister has had private conversations, and it's right that these are private conversations with a number of the survivors and their families over many months. And it's really important that those conversations continue. This was always going to be an incredibly difficult situation to resolve, where there will quite rightly and understandably be strong views on people who think one thing should happen to the tower and others who think that other things should happen. We need to try and find a way through that, and the government will say more on that in due course. I'm not going to say that in a TV interview, because I actually think it's really important those private conversations are allowed to continue, and they have been for many months.
Yes, I understand that, but we're talking about the public voice of Grenfell United, representing bereaved and survivors, who say they want the bereaved and survivors to be meaningfully consulted. This was only a short 4-week consultation, and the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, could not give a reason for her decision to demolish the tower. I mean, that surely should be a public reason to demolish.
Well, of course, there will be a public discussion about this. I think it's right that there has been, not just for the formal consultation, but a whole series of private conversations with different individuals involved in this for many months. That's right and proper. I've not been in those conversations, and I genuinely think it would be wrong for me to try and commentate on something on television that I think is clearly a really personal process for so many of the families involved in this. And look, it's a heartbreaking tragedy that we all saw unfold, but for the families involved, they've been living this every day, many of them still living in the shadow of that tower. There are rightly really strong views across this whole issue about what happens next. The government is doing what we can to work with families about this to come to a position on that, and the government will say more in due course. I'm not going to commentate on that, because I think those private conversations are key to this.
Let's turn to what you are here to talk about, making an announcement about new nuclear power stations. There'll be some of our viewers who will say you are going to ignore their concerns about safety or green spaces and just override that and build these nuclear power stations.
Well, what we've announced today as part of the government's plan for change is a really ambitious set of ideas for how we move forward nuclear power in this country. The truth is, Britain used to lead the world in nuclear power, but in decades past we haven't built any new nuclear infrastructure. And of course, these new modular reactors that are coming along are far smaller than the big power stations that we've been used to in decades past. And so they play a really important role in our energy security, but also delivering good, well-paid jobs right across the country and helping boost our economy in some of the key areas for the future around data centres and AI that are going to play such an important role. Communities will continue to have a voice in this process.
Can I just ask you...
communities will continue to have a voice in this process. Of course they will, because it's incredibly important that they do. But what we want to say as a government is that we need to get better in this country at building things. Things are stuck in red tape for far, far too long in this country, where we don't build the infrastructure we need. We want to push forward and get Britain building again.
As you said, there's been no nuclear power station built in Britain since 1995. Can you tell me, is there anywhere in the world where any country has commercially built one of these new small nuclear power plants?
Well, it's an innovative technology that's still being developed. There's a number of countries around the world that are developing this, that are far further ahead than we are on this. But this is, we've got a competition open at the moment around some of the future technologies. This will play a crucial role in our energy mix going into the future. But yes, the economics are important. What we're saying today is that we want to open up the planning system to allow those who have an interest in building one of these reactors to come to the government and say, we've identified a site, we think this would be suitable for a future modular reactor, and there'll be a conversation then around how that's delivered. But private finance will play an important role in building this. The key thing with this is that nuclear is part of our broader plan for building a clean power system into the future, so that we have energy security and we can bring down bills for people.
I think the answer is, so far, there's only 2 in the world, in Russia and in China. Lots of people doubt whether actually this is ever going to be commercially viable. But let me just ask you one other question, because you're in Glasgow, a UK Labour MP. We've talked about rising fuel bills. You've taken the winter allowance away from the majority of pensioners. But in Scotland, the Labour leader is saying he's going to bring back the winter allowance. So are you a UK Labour MP who wants the winter allowance abolished, or are you a Scottish Labour MP who wants it brought back?
Well, of course, in Scotland, we've had devolution now for a quarter of a century. I was 10 years old when the Scottish Parliament was created. The reason the Labour Party created the Scottish Parliament was so that across the UK we could make different decisions on different policy areas. That was why we created, that's why we believe in devolution. In Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and in parts of England, that allows people to make different decisions. The benefit of winter fuel payment was devolved to the Scottish Parliament this year. The SNP could have chosen to retain it if they wanted. They chose not to. There's now a decision for future governments in Scotland about what they do with it.
What do you
That's
believe
the point of devolution. And I'm afraid...
What do you believe in? Do you believe in
Anna there's nothing wrong at all with this having
bringing
different...
it back, or Keir Starmer taking it away? Just what do you believe in?
Well, I'm saying very clearly that there are different decisions made at different levels of government.
But I'm asking you very clearly, what do you believe in?
If the Scottish government chooses to make this decision in Scotland,
very clearly, who's right?
Well, no, I don't think this is about who's right at all. This is about different decisions being made in different parts of the UK. We're very comfortable with that after 25 years of devolution in Scotland. People will make different choices. That's the whole point of setting up the Scottish Parliament in the first place. Right. We made a decision, a tough decision, that we didn't want to have to make to means test the winter fuel payment in England, based on the fact that we inherited an economic mess from the previous government that we're trying to clear up. The budget that we announced in October gave £5 billion to the Scottish Government, the biggest budget they've ever had. They can now make the decisions here if they choose to do so.
I understand. My advice is not to say very clearly when you're not going to be very clear, but thank you for that interview. We really appreciate it.